It is week 11 in my year of stitches, and today we're looking at herringbone stitch. So I'm going to cut myself a length of thread, working with a red today, and I'm going to thread up my needle. As usual, I'm going to thread up with 3 strands for my herringbone stitch. Now this, again, herringbone stitch is typically a stitch that goes along a line, but it absolutely doesn't have to be. It can also, like many stitches, be used for filling. And this week I'm going to show you a really simple herringbone stitch to get you comfortable with the concept. And then next week we're going to move in some variations on herringbone stitch. So I am all threaded up my needle, and I'm going to start this way, where I bring my needle up and I'm going to bring it across up to about here on a diagonal. Now don't worry about your initial diagonal. We're just going for kind of loose measurements, and then you'll get a feel for the stitch. So I'm bringing it down. I'm going to come down to here. Take myself across, and I go back up, and I kind of going for a roughly equal distance. So you see, this is a really simple stitch where all we're doing is we're working in this almost like a kind of cross stitch manner, working along the line, then we go back on ourselves. Working with these diagonal stitches, and we're just trying to focus on keeping the diagonals parallel. So when I do my new diagonal, I kind of want my diagonals to run parallel to one another, and I'm just working that based on sight. Now, you can, like a lot of stitches, you can always bring in variations of how you stitch. And actually with herringbone, if you start varying it, it will become a lot easier. But I'm going to simplify my stitch method by doing my stitch across and keeping my needle on the surface, like I've shown you examples of doing before. And this actually makes your herringbone stitch neater, because you effectively end up controlling the length you're going back on yourself into a slightly more repetitive length because of the fact you're pushing your needle underneath. So you can see how I'm going along here. It becomes really quick, just these diagonal, short little stitches back on yourself. And I've gone wider there. I can bring my herringbone stitch in a little bit tighter here. Let me show you what it's like if it goes tighter. Like this. So you see how I can achieve a different look by having my herringbone stitch tighter together, wider apart, and it's to serve different purposes how you want it to be. So at a really simple level, that's your herringbone stitch. What I want to now show you is just going back on myself. So in order to do that, I find it much easier to work in the same direction I've just done before. So I'm going to take my hoop out. I'm going to flip this upside down. So if I actually want to end up creating a much narrower, tighter feeling border, I can do exactly that by just making my herringbone stitch really short and tight. So I'm going to do it this way, where I'm working along the line, always just leaving a little bit of a gap between each one. And I effectively end up creating this quite tight border. So that's a row of much tighter herringbone stitch. Now let me finish the thread on the back, but using exactly the same methodology. So if I wanted to start filling in a whole area using my herringbone stitch, I could do that using exactly the same very simple methodology. So I'm just going to get another colour here, get my pale blue. And I'm going to again take 3 strands. Now, if I wanted to create something that looked like it was all really kind of filled in, but in a cross-stitch herringbone manner, what I could do is I could get a second colour, like I'm doing now with this teal, blue, and do my herringbone stitch coming in and out of the same holes as last time. Now, all I want to do is when I go back down, just match myself up to that row above. So you see, like this. Let me go like here. So my lower down stitch goes to the gap, my top ones goes to the same holes. So I've got to my end of my line, and let me just show you that close to. So you can see here, if I carried on this manner and just started stitching row upon row, you get these little bits in the middle where everything's crossing over and it almost looks like they're tying into one another. So by just using a row of herringbone stitch, which is a really simple stitch, you're able to achieve quite a nice filling texture that doesn't feel too heavy. Now next week we're going to come on to a way of doing a 2-colour herringbone stitch, which isn't just doing 2 separate rows but actually interweaving them together. So I'll see you next week for that one.